So during the pandemic, I got 2 very successful cochlear implants. And my language about how I communicate about myself as a person with hearing loss, and I'm encouraging other people to embrace this concept. And it's that we all live uncertain lives. We never know when we're going to be able to understand and when we won't. And we all tend to think we hear better than we do. So if you don't prepare before you go to an event, if you don't prepare before you go to the doctor, if you don't prepare for all of these times when you may be in challenging situations, by the time you get there and you find out that you can't understand, then it's too late to ask for the accommodations that you need. So I'm suggesting, and I started practicing, just asking across the board, no matter how well I hear, and if I don't happen to need it in that situation, that's great. But if I do need it, then I've taken care of myself so I can still participate. Where do we have problems? Well, it's with speech intelligibility, and hearing devices aren't enough. Oops, excuse me. That slide shouldn't have been like that, but there's nothing I can do. So most people do not realize that hearing loss is a disability. And if you don't know it's a disability, the chances that you're going to ask for an accommodation is slim. So I'd like everybody to think about how they think about the fact that people get ramps for mobility issues. Nobody thinks that there's a problem with that. We want people to be able to enjoy a regular life. We want people to be able to get on the bus. Well, it's the same thing for us. As everybody knows, there's a huge stigma surrounding hearing loss. I liken it to what mental illness was in the 50s. It was a very taboo term. That's not really true today. Almost everybody's seen somebody sometime to talk about some problem they have. If you're going to live your best life, somehow you have to come to terms with the term disability and, unfortunately, hearing impairment, because both of those terms are of the law. Those are the terms that are used in all the laws that are both federal, state, and local. So I don't know how you're going to do that, but you need to somehow get to a place of acceptance so that you're not thinking that there's something bad about you, but it's just that you want the best that you can possibly have for yourself. Hearing loss is a disability covered under many disability rights laws, and disability rights are considered civil rights. So just like you think of other civil rights, the right to vote, no discrimination for a variety of things. Our disability in the law called hearing impairment is included in that. Some of the laws that you may be familiar with in California is the California Unruh Act. And in Washington, you have similar laws that are called Washington State Civil Rights Laws. Now, our law was created in 1959, and I know yours have been going on for a really long time. And the Washington State Association is my pride and joy for all of the legislation that you've gotten passed in the last few years. I'm envious of you. I drool about it. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 has Section 504. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 has Section 508. There's the Fair Housing Act that was amended in 1988 to include disability. And of course, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I'm assuming almost everybody in this meeting is familiar with. The ADA is not new. This year, it's celebrating its 33rd anniversary. Hearing loss is a disability covered under the ADA. But if we want to have communication access everywhere, we really have to ask for it. I can't tell you how many times I'm asking for it, and somebody says to me, well, How come there aren't very many people doing this? Then when I tell them there are 48 million of us, then they're kind of flummoxed. So we should be pounding down everybody's doors about getting the communication access that we need. The ADA covers a wide variety of areas, and it's divided into sections that are called titles. Title 1 covers employment. Title 2 covers state and local government. Title 3 covers public entities. Title 4 covers telecommunications. And Title 5 is a miscellaneous area. Where might you likely be able to get communication access? Everywhere. You can get it at a museum, for education, at the theater. Technically, at the airport, we know we don't get very much there. On the bus and taxi, in a bank, in a hospital, the grocery store, the pharmacy. Now, the place of worship that I have on this slide is in California. Our UNRU Act is different than the ADA. It's more stringent. And the ADA had exclusions. And one of the exclusions in the Americans with Disability Act is places of worship. But in California, they didn't exclude any businesses. So all businesses in the state are required to comply with the civil rights disability laws of our state. One of the reasons that the ADA is not actually completely specific about what things for what people is because we have a spectrum disorder. So one size doesn't fit all. The range of our spectrum is from people who are deaf with a capital D, who are consider themselves part of the deaf community, and their primary form of communication is American Sign Language. You may be wondering, why is it a capital D? Well, it's recognized as a complete culture, just as if it was French, German, Japanese, Korean. Then there are people who are late deafened, like me. When I take up, I hear better than I ever thought I could ever hear for the rest of my life with my cochlear implants. But when I take my cochlear implants off, the only thing that I can hear is if somebody slams a door very hard, I can hear that a little bit. Then they have a whole group who are severe hearing loss, which actually is probably the majority of people who are members of HLAA. And then we have people who have mild to moderate hearing loss. Now, a person with mild hearing loss might not even have any idea that they have hearing loss at all. With moderate hearing loss, you're noticing that there are areas that you certainly have problems with. So this whole spectrum of people all need to be accommodated within the law and within the disability of hearing loss. So what are the obstacles to speech comprehension? Distance from the sound source, reverberation or echo, competing background noise, and face masks. So as I keep mentioning, I do really well in most situations, but I still cannot understand most people who are wearing face masks. And all of us are familiar with background noise. It's the bane of all of our existence. Now, some people don't realize that the distance from the sound source is a huge obstacle to speech comprehension because hearing instruments have a limited range of effectiveness. And that range is about 6 feet. So anything outside that 6-foot range is going to be difficult for you to understand. Some people are under the misconception that if there were a PA in a room, that should be enough with your hearing aids for you to be able to understand. But the reality is the speakers for the public address system usually are in the ceiling and generally more than 6 feet away from the person who's sitting in that presentation. So it's outside of our range. What does the ADA, and I'm talking specifically about the ADA because it covers the most things. So what does it really say? What does it say that we're entitled to? And it says that we're entitled to communication with people with hearing disabilities is equally effective as communication with people without disabilities. Well, I know everybody who's sitting here today knows that there is in no way, shape, or form that we have achieved that goal. Since we're a spectrum disorder, what are the kinds of things that they need to provide for us? And it's not per se hearing loops. It's not definitive things except under special conditions. What is to be provided is called auxiliary aids and services. And what might that look like? And what do you need to consider to have effective communication? So the first things to consider are the nature of the conversation, the length, the complexity, context of the communication, and a person's normal method of communication. So for some of us, our normal method of communication might be a hearing loop, might be captions, might be a pocket talker. But for a person who would be deaf with a capital D, their normal method of communication is ASL, American Sign Language. So considering the topics that I mentioned earlier about the things that need to be considered when you are addressing providing communication access, there are things that are easily accomplished. So if the nature of the conversation was something very simple, where's the restroom? Someone could easily have a whiteboard, and I would like to have a whiteboard at every information counter in the United States. You say, where is the restroom? And they just write on the whiteboard, down the hall to the left. Communication access would have been accomplished. If they don't have a whiteboard, they could use paper and pen. Now, I want to tell you, something happens when you ask people, when you tell people that you don't understand, and could you please write it down for them? I don't know what there is about that, but frequently I have people stare at me like deer in the headlights. So I just want to prepare you that people are not accustomed to thinking of writing something down for paper with a paper and pen as communication access. And you just need to keep reminding them. You can also have infographics. So at the beginning of the pandemic, the Massachusetts Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing created this infographic, which is on the left here, to be able to communicate with people. They could ask the question, point to the question, and you could point to the graphics there to communicate answers to those questions. This kind of infographic has also been used in other places in the United States. Unfortunately, in California, we don't have what I'm going to talk about next, and I want it. When it's connected to your driver's license, and anybody who chooses to have it can receive a special infographics card for you to be able to communicate with the police if you're stopped for anything. Some states even have that your driver's license can be marked that you're deaf and hard of hearing. So when a person, let's say you were driving down the freeway and you got pulled over by the police and they pulled up your license plate before you even got out of your car, they would know that you were deaf or were hard of hearing, which makes things much better for them, because if you move to get something, they're not worried that you might be getting a firearm. And we all know that when you roll down your window, it's the worst situation that we could possibly have, because there's background noise, which is the road noise of the cars coming through your window, making it difficult to understand the police. The next kind of technology I'm going to talk about, and the auxiliary aids and services, are actually technologies. One is a personal amplifier. The most common one, and my favorite, is a pocket talker. And pocket talkers are made by Williams Sound. And I think they have 4 different ones right now. My favorite one is their newest model, and it's white. And it's stereo. It also has a built-in telecoil. And it also has personal amplification. So if you're thinking about having something just in your emergency to go kit, there isn't a finer product than that I could recommend for you. The next auxiliary aid in service is assistive listening systems. And there are some ADA guidelines on providing assistive listening systems. And I'll tell you about that when I'm at the slide that directs attention to that. Of course, there's CART, and we all love CART, whether it's in person or remote, and interpreting. Now, there are different kinds of interpreting, and I also have a slide for that, so you can see what that might look like in a variety of situations. Here's the picture of the personal amplifier that I like so much. You can see that in this picture, we have a neck loop, we have headphones, there are earbuds, so there's a connection available for anybody. The microphone on the top there, you can get an extension cord. The one I have is over 6 feet long, so you could hand somebody the microphone and be 6 feet away from them, still be able to hear them. Now I'd like to direct some attention to assistive listening systems. The ADA does mandate in any location that has a public address system, they're required to have an assistive listening system, except for the courts. The courts are required to have an assistive listening system, even if they don't have a public address system. There are currently 3 technologies that are possible. The first one I'm going to talk about is a hearing loop, which is all of our favorite. We don't need to check out any additional equipment if we have telecoil-enabled hearing instruments. We walk into a venue, press a button on our device, open up our smartphone, and use the remote on your smartphone, and you're set to go. With new hearing aids now and cochlear implants, with the remotes on our smartphones, we're even able to adjust the ratio between the hearing loop, the telecoil, and the microphone. And you might find many times that it's much more beneficial to make it more telecoil than microphone. The second assistive listening system is called FM, and FM is a radio frequency. It's just like FM radio, but it has a different range of FM that it's broadcast on. This system, everybody needs a receiver, everybody needs a connector. Infrared is by light, and it's line of sight. And you may be familiar with this with a remote control for your TV. Many of them are infrared. Now, some of the problems in FM and infrared, they share the same situation with getting a receiver. I can't tell you how many times before I've gone to a venue that has told me that their assistive listening system is an FM and asked them to please ensure that if it has rechargeable batteries, they're fully charged, or if they're not rechargeable, that somebody checks the batteries in those devices to ensure that the batteries that are in there are fresh and all the way in the green zone. And lo and behold, it's right when I'm waiting for the punchline of a play I'm seeing or something else, and the batteries go dead. Well, by the time you would get up to go to tell somebody they were dead, you would have missed half the end of the play. It's very, very discouraging. In 2010, when the ADA standards were revised, they updated them to require assistive listening system to be hearing aid compatible. Prior to that, that wasn't included in written language. So this was actually a boon for us. So now, doesn't make your FM system and your infrared system, they're required to have neck loops for those of us who have telecoils in our hearing instrument. And that requirement is called hearing aid compatible, and you might see it written as HAC. On the right, you see the hearing loop accessibility symbol, and this is called the International Symbol of Access for Hearing Loss. And if it's a hearing loop, it has been internationally augmented with a T, even though it's actually not required by the ADA. We've received no pushback about that. The language underneath that is what they get in the hearing loop committee would like all signs to have on it. We want people to know that in addition to having a telecoil in your hearing aid, if you don't have that, you can request headphones, request a receiver. Captions. The gold standard is communication access real-time translation, fondly called CART. You can have it in person or remote. It can be closed or open. And the difference in that, the terminology of closed or open, is that could be an example of like on your TV. So prior to when you activate it on your television, it's closed. So it's not always there. Once you activate it, then it becomes open because it's always there. But sometimes there are some situations you may be in where as soon as you come to the event, as soon as you come to the theater, they have captions that are automatically streaming that nobody can turn off. Some people are not familiar with having CART at meetings. This image that you see right there with the blue screen that has the full top to bottom text happens to be at an HLAA convention. I have given this presentation several other times now, and in the other meetings that I have given this presentation, the majority of people never knew that there was such a thing as CART for meetings. We live in an amazing time for people with hearing loss. I feel so grateful every day that technology has advanced to the place that automatic speech recognition captions are really here and they're really good. So the way that you activate them most of the time, and what I'm encouraging you to think about, is on your smart device. I could not have lived through the pandemic very easily without speech-to-text app on my cell phone. So when I go to the grocery store, I'm masked, they're masked. I turn on my speech-to-text app and rotate it so that the microphone, which is normally facing the bottom of your hand, is at the top. So you can reach out and you're closer to the person who you're trying to caption what they say. And the checker in the grocery store would start talking. And even though it was past the 12-foot space that's the best for captioning, I could usually understand everything that was said. Two of the most common apps, and the first one is AVA, which is my favorite. And it's my favorite because it's the most robust of all of the ASR apps. You can have it on your smartphone, you can have it on your tablet, you can have it on your computer. And it is the only one that allows multiple people to uniquely be connected to the conversation at one time. I think it's something like you can have 12 people at one time in a conversation. All of the other ASR apps don't allow unique identification of people in the meeting. And how you experience it is like our captions right now today, like on the screen. It's one running conversation and it doesn't identify necessarily who's talking. Another very popular ASR app that's available only for Android is called Live Transcribe. Many people are very fond of that. The third ASR app that I'm going to talk about was not created for the hard of hearing community. It was created for business people, and that's called Otter. So the idea behind Otter was, long before the pandemic, business people were engaged in meetings, the kind of Zoom meetings that we have now all the time. And people, rather than paying attention to the presenter and the presentation, they're busy trying to take notes. And some smart person thought, oh, this is silly. We have this technology. Why don't we just create a speech-to-text app that would be a note taker, and then people can pay attention to the presentation. And so Otter was born. Now, a feature of Otter, which could be very beneficial to you if you happen to like it and decide you want to use it, and that's the information searchable. So you imagine if you're a business person and you were talking about a specific thing in the meeting, you could just say whatever that was when you're playing back the audio recording, and it would find the location of what you were looking for. Translation comes in many forms. The image on the left here, I took at the Walk for Hearing in 2010 in San Francisco. And that day when I snapped this image, this ASL interpreter looked so beautiful to me. It was so compelling, with the clouds behind them, the beautiful way that their hands are expressing what's being said. And it's always reminded me that communication comes in many forms and they're all beautiful. So the most common form of translation is American Sign Language. And many people don't realize that sign language comes in many different kinds of nationalities. There's French Sign Language, there's German Sign Language, there are Asian sign languages. So each sign language from cultures is their own unique language. So a person who speaks American Sign Language doesn't necessarily understand somebody who speaks French Sign Language. The first time I ever experienced tactile interpreting, it really brought tears to my eyes. I was attending an event at the Ed Roberts Center in Berkeley, and it was an event that was the full hearing loss community. So the deaf community was there, the hard of hearing community was there, there were deaf blind people there, and I hadn't really thought about it, even though we do have a disorder that one can be deaf and blind called Usher syndrome, but how would a person communicate? And this particular person had somebody sitting next to them. They had their hand out like this, and a person was signing in the palm of their hand in a way that they could understand. It really brought tears to my eyes that day. Kind of interpreting that many of us who have hearing loss don't know that's available to us, and commonly in the healthcare setting, and it's called oral interpreting. If you ask for an oral interpreter, the person who does the interpreting has been specially trained to be able to communicate with people who have hearing loss. So they speak slowly, they articulate well. They're also trained to pay attention to us to ascertain what we're comprehending. And you can ask for that kind of interpreting in a situation to help you understand. So now you know what some of the technologies are. How do you get them? Who might you ask? So the first place to look is for an ADA coordinator. All city, state agencies are required to have an ADA coordinator. I want to tell you, just because they're required to have it, it might take some sleuthing on your part to find them. And if it does take that kind of sleuthing, you need to raise your voice loudly at a city council meeting and tell them that they're not fulfilling the law and you couldn't find that person, and therefore it was almost impossible for you to get the accommodation that you need. Another place that you would commonly ask for an accommodation would be hospital and healthcare. And here, based on my experience, it's frequently buried in interpretive services. I don't understand why that's like that. I have vehemently complained that it's like that, but this is a behemoth and it's kind of already instilled in that area, and I don't see it moving anytime soon. So if you're having a hard time getting the accommodation you need, the first place to ask for is interpretive services. Now, the next place, if you don't get it in interpretive services, is patient services. So every hospital has patient services. And depending on the sophistication of the hospital, sometimes in patient services, they'll know about interpretive services, sometimes they won't. but not enough of us are complaining and complaining loudly and diligently. I'd like to remind everybody that in my area, and I'm assuming your area as well, every time you have an appointment with a doctor, every time you have a visit to a hospital, they send you an email afterwards asking you to rate your experience. This is a huge opportunity for us. The hospitals and healthcare systems hire third-party entities to conduct these surveys. And they do not want any bad information on these surveys. So if you have not gotten the exact accommodation that you asked for, if you had any difficulty whatsoever understanding while you were participating in some kind of care, you have to say it was terrible because you couldn't understand. And so what happens is all of these bad reviews are tallied, and then patient services has to address that. Another place that you might find what you're looking for might be in visitor information. I know that many times for theaters, live theater, it's in visitor information. You might find when you look down the list of visitor information, there sometimes is a tab for accessibility. Sometimes it's know before you go, but take a look there to see if you can find what you're looking for. Now in our chapter, the Diablo Valley chapter, our chapter members complained vehemently about the fact that they were saying, I've been telling them, you have to ask, you have to ask. Well, they complained that we don't know how to find these people. So I applied for a grant from one of our local service agencies, and they gave us this grant. And Alan Katsura proceeded to investigate what would be the best way for us to gather this information, and also then to be able to have it available to people. I'm very proud to say that we have a list of ADA coordinators. Originally, it was going to be only in our county. But after we did our county, we thought that maybe it would be helpful to everybody else in California. And we filled out as many of the other cities as we could in California. And I think pretty generally, we've covered the whole state. We also have a list of all the hearing loops that are available in California on our website. And I think in this particular presentation, the last screen, I may have the information about that so you can take a look at it. We have all of you to thank for this graphic on this page. It was invented in Washington, the Sherry Parazzoli's outreach work, and it's been used extensively by advocates all over the country in the Get in the Hearing Loop committee meetings and our information. And it says more than the words. It says more than anything that we can think to explain why we need communication access. But the language that happens to go with it is communication access helps people with hearing loss the same way ramps help people with mobility issues. My general feeling is if you show somebody just the hearing access symbol and the mobility symbol with the equal, I think it's pretty easy to get. Thank you all for creating that symbol. So I have a dream. My dream is that we have hearing-friendly communities from San Francisco to New York. That's going to require awareness on our part to know what's required. Courage. We have to exercise the courage muscle. Take action. And I believe if we do those three things, I think that the likelihood is great that we're going to see the change that we want. I specifically put the image on the left-hand side of this slide because it's so poignant. And it's this huge reminder of what it really took to get the ADA passed. This was not an easy thing. Our legislators did not pass this out of the goodness of their hearts. They passed it because they were shamed. People with mobility issues climbed on hands and knees up the steps of the Capitol. And you see this little tiny, it's a little hard to see, but the person who has on a red and white hat that looks kind of like the hat that you wear when you ride your bike today, that young woman is 12 years old. We owe them a gratitude of debt. None of us have had this kind of courage. We, hide, right? We don't want anybody to notice us. So this is a reminder to all of us that this is the kind of persistence and diligence it's going to really take for us to get what we need. I think on my last slide here, I have one more after this, and then I'll come back to questions. And that's where we have two lists on our website, the ADA coordinators in California and hearing loop installations in California. And it's in one of the top tabs. I think it says access. So we're back to questions. And now I'm going to open it up. Oops. Let's see how I get out of here. Oh, wait a minute.
So this is Sherry. So are we going for questions? I think we can do them a couple of ways. We can use the reactions button down at the bottom and to raise our hand. And another way to to have a question is to put the question in chat. So, anyway, so thank you very, very much, Anne. So let's get started. So I see Kimberly has her hand up.
Can you hear me? Okay. I don't really have a question, but I have a comment. And first of all, thank you so much, Anne. This was outstanding, so informative. I love your call to action for us to ask for what we need so that we can get accommodations. And I learned a lot, so thank you. My biggest takeaway is what you said about not acknowledging we have a disability. And I realized this about a week ago, because I gave a talk over the weekend about hearing loss. And the man I was talking with had talked about my disability. And I didn't say this in the talk, but I talked to him and I said, I've never thought of myself as having a disability. And I really do. And that is why you mentioned in this talk that we don't ask for accommodations because we don't think of ourselves as being disabled. And also we hide, right? One of the reasons that hearing loss is so invisible is because we hide it and because of all the stigma. So that was a great awareness for me and a takeaway, and I will ask for accommodations. Thank you so much for being here and for this excellent presentation.
Excellent comments, Kimberly, and I think several of us could probably agree with that. Mary D, you have your hand up. Unmute and go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if anybody in this group has ever gone on a Rick Steves tour. Rick Steves, he puts together tours. He's based in Edmonds, Washington. They go all over the world. So has anybody ever gone on a tour like that and asked for accommodations?
So this is Sherry, and I have never been on a Rick Steves tour or asked for accommodations, but I'm going to say there is some history there. About 10 years ago, I know that he was conducting workshops in a location either in Woodinville or Edmonds. And there was a big push to get communication access at his workshops. Our request pretty much fell on deaf ears. Nothing ever really happened with that, but I think that that's a really, really good question. And I do know that some people are looking at getting communication access at some other programs like Rhodes Scholars. Does anyone else have any comments on that?
I have a little something to say. So there's an organization promoting disability access, and it's called Travel Ability. And I gave a presentation at their first conference that they had, which happened to be in San Francisco. And at that event were travel organizations from all kinds of different places. So one happened to be, and I happen to remember it, Oregon was there. And I don't know if Washington State was there. So the place that I would encourage you to go is to your tourist boards.
That's a great idea.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I see Arlene's hand is up. Go ahead, Arlene, unmute and go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been on many, many trips. I've been very fortunate to have traveled a lot, and my hearing kept getting progressively worse as I got older and older. And I have never had a guide on a trip, ever refused to wear my microphone. I just came back from India in December. My guide wore that microphone on his collar every day. If we stopped and had a local guide, you know how they do when you get to a place and they hire someone, that local guide would wear it. I mean, I have never had anyone tell me no, ever. This is like 20 years worth. And of course, the microphones keep getting better because now you can have your implant. So, but I have a ReSound hearing aid and I have a cochlear implant, and I have a microphone for both, so they can actually wear one on each collar. But I hear everything, so it makes a huge difference. I mean, we can't be afraid to travel and live life just because we have a hearing loss. I mean, we're a person with the disability, but we are not the disability, if you know what I'm saying. So that's just my answer. There's no reason to stay home from traveling because we're having a hearing loss. Thank you.
Arlene, I
Yes.
want to point out, because I know that we all take whatever we need in some situations for us to be able to understand. The situation that you're describing, though, the group, and in Europe, they have disability laws that are equal to our own. They're not providing the accessibility which they're required to do.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
so cruise ships,
Yeah.
that's really high on the agenda about that. But if you
Yeah.
don't ask ahead of time, they're not going to ensure that your tour guide has what's needed for people on the tours.
Yeah.
So the purpose of my presentation is to push the envelope to get what's required of us. Excuse me, what's required of the other to provide accessibility for us. Now,
Yeah.
if they had some accessibility and you preferred your own, that's your personal choice. But I can't imagine a tour guide wearing 10 different microphones and trying to figure out whose microphone belonged
Yeah,
to whom
yeah.
at the end.
Yeah, you're right.
And, you know, if they gave the wrong microphone to the wrong person, they're paired to those devices. You know, it could be really, it could be a real mess.
Yeah.
So, but thank you very much for commenting and telling everybody not to stay home, because
Yeah,
we
but I
don't want
definitely-
people to stay home.
I definitely get your point. So Rhodes Scholar, Rick Steves, Overseas Adventure Travel, these are the big companies that have to change their attitude and put this into practice. Not change their attitude, change their practices. So thank you. Yeah, good point. I'm sorry.
Very nicely said. Very nicely said. So Connie, unmute and your question's next.
I'm wondering if Washington State has lists of ADA coordinators.
And you answer that.
Less than what?
Well, you mentioned that California has a list of ADA coordinators for the state of California, and I'm just wondering if Washington has that.
No, they didn't have it. Alan Katsura and I created it.
Okay,
So we went and found all the ADA coordinators to put in the list to make it easier for people.
and no one has yet done that for Washington, is that correct?
Well, our chapter doesn't cover Washington. You all are Washington, so if that's something that you wanted to do, you could get some people together to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Ann. Yes, so no, we don't have that. I will say that when I started getting the Hearing Loop program, I did do some research and found the ADA coordinators within maybe 5 cities that were close to where I live and counties, and reached out to them and started that process. But it was a process, and Ann also did mention that, you know, some counties or cities might not even know that they are required to have an ADA coordinator, and we found that this was true down in Vancouver. So this would be a great opportunity or a great project for someone in our group who would like to take that on. Okay, so we're getting close to time here, and I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask the question. So I'm going to move over now to Roger. Oh, Roger?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is, I was recently on a Road Scholar tour, and it was to Eugene, Oregon, but everything was looped, and it's really added to my enjoyment and information. The rooms were looped, the concert hall was looped, and there was a talk about loops to help us understand. My question is, I was talking to someone in my church about looping a meeting room, and he talked like it was difficult because they had to raise the carpet and the floor. And but I was reading somewhere that loop could be on the ceiling also.
Yeah.
So it seemed like that would be much less expensive and more convenient to do. Do you have any information on ceiling loops, whether they work and so on?
So it's recommended that you hire a professional loop installer and have them come scope the space. So in some circumstances, you can have the loop wire above your head. Generally, it's underneath the floor or the carpeting because it's invisible and people don't like to see the wire around the wall. But depending on what the situation is and how tall is the ceiling, how high is it, there is a possibility that that could be done. Now, another conversation to have with this person is, do they think it's important that people over a certain age can still participate in the programs of that place of worship? Because if people can't hear, what's the point in coming?
That's right.
You can't get the message. You can't communicate with other people. And do they really want to exclude this whole segment of people? I don't think they do. I think they don't really realize how many people it is. So Roger, you can contact Sherry or I anytime to continue this conversation. You know, Sherry's the chair of the Get in the Hearing Loop Committee.
So yes. So Roger and I have started some conversations, and there are definitely ways that the loops can be installed. And again, it's getting to the right people to have those conversations with, so we can continue that discussion. So I'm going to move on now, and I want to make sure Carolyn can ask her question.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to mention, not to forget, that if you own stock in a corporation, go to the annual meeting and ask in the question answer box if they provide accommodations for hearing loss. I did that. I actually tried to get portable counter loops at Costco and I tried several years working with the internal folks. But when I went to the annual meeting, it happened for my Costco's that I shop at. So you really, you can short circuit all the employees and just go to the annual meeting and make a point.
That's a great suggestion, Carolyn. Okay. So so now we have one more. We'll take Mary D, and then we'll wrap up our meeting. Go ahead, Mary D.
I just wanted to say, I am the one who asked the question about Rick Steves tour. And I am going on a Rick Steves tour in May to Ireland. And so I am going to respectfully request clear-faced masks if they insist on wearing them during the tours. And I know they do have a device, but it sounds to me like it's very old-fashioned. You have to wear headphones. Well, headphones over my hearing aids will do no good at all. But Carolyn turned me on to a loop that will plug into this device. So I'm going to go to Rick Steves' office before and see if I can try it out.
Yeah, so I know that Washington State has, and I can't think of the name of what yours is called. Sherry, who do you get your phones from? Who do they get their phones from?
Hamilton Relay.
No, I mean the agency that you get, I think maybe is the acronym TED.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, so they also provide neck loops. So I believe you're entitled to a neck loop like we are in California. You just might want to stick it in your purse. Before I turn the full presentation back to Sherry, I'd like to get a show of hands as to if people liked this border that's on the bottom of the screen so that your captions are in that location rather than being floating on the slides. And I have this dinky iPad. Can you just physically raise your hand or something? And Sherry or somebody, can you kind of just take a look to see, do the majority of people like that?
It's about half and half right now, I'd say.
Okay, so the people who didn't say they liked it, are you not aware of what happened before with the captions? Raise your hand if you weren't aware. Any hands go up?
No.
And I think you need to make it clear that you're talking about during the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, thank you, Alan. So during the PowerPoint presentation, previously, the captions would be where the information was on the slide, frequently depending on the size of your screen. And so what happened for people was the captions were interfering with information that was on the slide. Now, if you had a 27-inch monitor at home, there's a space around that. You could put your captions anywhere that you wanted, but most laptops today are 13 or 14 inches, and lots of people have much smaller computer monitors than that. So by doing this border below it, it doesn't interfere with the information that's on the slide.
So Carol, so Ann, I'll respond to that and share my experience. So I did what I normally do when we started the meeting. I moved the captions up so that they were out of the way. And then when you told us about the border you created, I moved my captions back down to the border. And I thought that it worked very well. And the only thing that I noticed was, and I like this, is there are several times when there were maybe 3 to 4 lines of captions. It did extend over into the slide just slightly, but that was because there were many more lines of captions than just 3 lines. So like maybe 4 or 5 lines. I mean, that's the only thing I noticed.
Okay, so I worked with Alan and Carolyn about this and tried to make the border big enough to allow for the 4 lines. So I'm happy that you told me that. I will do more testing about that. So now it's back to you completely.
Okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank our speaker, Ann, for joining us today, and for Alan for his help, and all of our participants. Thank you very, very much for joining our second Empowerment Series meeting. I hope that you learned something. There was a lot of great information shared here today. And one of the things I want to make sure that everyone has would be access to the chat. And so, Carolyn, do you want to take a minute to tell everyone how to save the chat?
Sure. If you open up chat, and I'm talking about computers now because you cannot save chat on the iPhone or iPad, but on a computer, open up the chat, and at the very bottom of that chat, you'll see a little smiley face, but you see 3 dots. Click on the 3 dots next to that smiley face, and it will say Save Chat. Just click on the Save Chat. And if you want to know where it goes into your Documents folder under the Zoom subfolder, which Zoom creates for you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Kimberly, you had your hand up. Did I miss you? Did you have something else you wanted to share before we?
No, I was just applauding. That was
Okay.
the applause. Thank
Okay,
you.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming. And our next meeting will actually be a hope meeting. It will be the first Monday, the first Wednesday of the month, each month. So our next one will be coming up, will be April. And so stay tuned to our website for more information and sign up for our e-news. And again, thank you very, very much for everyone coming today. It was great to see you all. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks for inviting me.
Great. I'm glad so many people came. This is great. Good. April 5th, that's our next time.
Thank you, Arlene.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ann.